Hello everybody, this is Lanko, and today I'm going to be making a video about how to learn a small language. Now, what exactly is a small language? Well, a small language is a language that usually has relatively few speakers and is also usually lacking in language learning resources. Now, languages which may fit into this category include languages like Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Tajik, and usually other languages which are studied very little by people outside of their respective communities. In my own case, while studying these sorts of languages, I realized that I was struggling a lot in finding resources and trying to find study methods because, well, there just weren't that many, period, right? There weren't that many people to give me advice on how to learn these languages, and because relatively few people learn these languages, nobody was there quite to give me resources for this language as well, right? So nobody was there to tutor me, nobody was there to give me the resources to learn this language. So I had to do it all on my own. Now in this video, I'm gonna bless upon you the knowledge that I have learned throughout my year or so of learning these more untouched languages. Now, if you studied a so-called small language, something that you may have realized is that these languages tend to have, well, fairly little resources in your language to learn them, right? So if you're learning Kyrgyz, for example, in my case, I found out actually that when I tried learning the language, I looked things up in English and there were very few books or textbooks or videos or really anything available in order to teach me this language. So what I did, right, once I ran out of material to teach me this language in my own language, is I went over to the internet and I found resources in other languages. Now, what you have to do here, right? Okay, so this really depends case by case. So what happens here is, well, if you speak another language, use that to your advantage. So let's just say you're learning Portuguese, right? And you just cannot find any resources from your native language, which may be Afrikaans. Well, what you can do is you can look it up from Spanish to get a textbook to learn Portuguese, right? Or in my case, right? When I was looking up textbooks and books for Russian, very few things would pop up in English, but way more things would pop up in Russian, right? That's one example of this happening. Now, what you can do as well is you can also look up resources in other languages, but you have to make sure that you're translating things properly and that you have a native speaker that can help you out in this case. Because if you don't know the language of the textbook that you're using to learn this language, you don't want to misinterpret or mistranslate or misunderstand something. You want to have somebody there to kind of show you the way. You can always find a pen pal on the internet, on Tandem, on HelloTalk. Maybe they can help you figure out what the book is saying and they can help you explain like the grammar and the vocabulary and so on and so forth, which are being presented. Now, you can always use Google Translate as well. So what you can do actually, Google has this wonderful feature. God bless Google for this. You can just use Google Translate. So if you do end up finding a book and you cannot find anybody to help you or guide you through this book, you can always simply use Google Translate to translate the pages. And I mean, that's better than having no resources, right? Now, what I usually do with these translated resources is I turn them into flashcards, and I also use them to make my own notes. Now, this is very effective, a very efficient way, especially if you're only using it for vocabulary, because no matter what, Translate will translate the words. And yeah, so that's one way, making your own resources. You have to make your own resources a lot of the time, and a good way to do that is to look up textbooks, look up books, look up whatever you can in another language for that language, right? If you want to learn Punjabi, you can't find resources in English, look it up in Hindi, and so on and so forth. Another tip that I'm going to give you is always try to find content that has subtitles. Now, the issue with this, or the reason why I'm bringing this up, is because a lot of the time, because there may be few speakers of this said language around you, or because you may not be exposed to this language very often, or because there might not be very many resources to explain how the grammar works or how the sound system works, you may have a hard time understanding exactly what's going on if you just hear audio without any sort of explanations, right? You're just gonna have to kind of figure things out on your own. Therefore, it would help you a ton if you had a resource, particularly a video of some sort, like a show or a movie and so on, that had subtitles. So if you're gonna consume content, try to find content that has subtitles. You can always try to make your own, but that's gonna make your world a lot harder. I recommend that you find something with subtitles already. This goes without saying, but try to find a community which speaks this language. Try to go on the internet, look at your local language clubs, try to find people that speak the language, you know. If you're learning Japanese and you just want to focus on learning Japanese, right? Well, try your best to find like a local Japanese speaking group. Now, I know that Japanese doesn't count as a small language, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? If you're learning let's just say you're learning Kazakh, right? Join a Facebook group full of Kazakhs and see when the next Kazakh cultural event is, and then attend that event, and then go there and practice and make friends and so on and so forth. You see, this is exactly how you progress in your language, and you can make lots of progress, trust me. By having friends who speak the language and practicing every day, you're going to improve a lot. So that's another thing that you can do. You can go ahead, go on Facebook, go on social media, go on Tandem, and try to find these local groups that are hosting events, or that simply, that are hosting events or that contain people of the culture, or that's of a culture that speaks the language that you are trying to practice, right? Another tip is try to find a podcast for your language. A super big thing about learning languages is you always have to listen in order to get the hang of it. If you don't listen, you're not going to learn. So listen along with your reading, listen along while you're cooking, listen while you're driving instead of listening to music. Do all these things, listen to the language so it sticks in your brain and it sticks to your brain, and so you are immersed in the language, because immersion is what gets you the best results in language learning. Now, the very last thing that I'm going to say here is that when it comes to small languages, they are extremely hard to study for the aforementioned reasons. There are not that many resources for them, there's very few native speakers, and a lot of time it's something that you do out of passion, or of course, you can also do it for employment. You can also do it for because of a love interest. But generally, or at least in my case, I have done it because I am just so passionate about it, right? Because I like it, right? But you need that passion. So the struggle with learning a small language is that you need the passion to learn it, because unlike Japanese, unlike Russian, unlike Chinese, you cannot simply go on Duolingo, study the language, and then be like, oh, okay, I'll come back to it tomorrow. With these languages, you cannot simply find resources wherever you go. It's going to be harder because you have to make these resources yourself. You have to verify the resources yourself. You have to double check the resources. And on top of that, on top of making the resources and double checking them, there's also the fact that, well, once you have these resources to study and to work with, you also have an even harder time trying to find native speakers to practice with, and so on and so forth. So because it's so much harder to study a small language, because there's a lack of support, unlike there is with Russian or with Japanese or with Chinese, which already has so many supports, not only scholarships and people and like language clubs and resources that already exist. Not only are you putting an extra stress on yourself, but it's also just harder overall, right? It's harder to become immersed in this smaller language. So what I recommend really is that if you're going to be studying a small language, please find yourself a passion, make yourself passionate for it, tell yourself why you're learning this language. Because if you have to make resources, spend extra time studying this language because it's harder, because you have to do this venture by yourself essentially, make sure that you're doing it with a good purpose and something that you're not going to give up down the line, right? You don't want to put in months of effort just for you to simply let go of it all because you thought it was too hard, or because it's too hard to advance without any external help, right? So make sure that you're enamored. Make sure that you find a good reason to learn this language. You want to learn this language because you want to travel there. You want to learn this language because you want to speak to your significant other. You want to learn this language because you want to do this, or you want to do that, or you want to do that. But make sure you have a reason to learn the language, or else I doubt that you will stay on track with your language learning. Make sure that you have a good goal when it comes to learning a small language. Well, everybody, that has been today's video. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, for today I was a little bit passionate while making this video. Thank you so much. This has been Lion-Cool. I'll see you in the next video. I apologize for not uploading for a while. It's just life has been throwing things at me. Stay tuned. New video soon.